Hi there. How are you today? Thank you so much for joining me here. I am Will, and these are Stories by Will. We're going to continue reading from the book we started yesterday, Tales Told from Holland. Today we got a magical story. It's going to be wonderful. And we're also going to learn a little bit about history. So this story was actually translated from Dutch into Old English. So I might stumble and fumble a little bit trying to read the words, but over time we'll get practice a little bit better. So today's story is The Mermaid of Edam, a tale from the province of North Holland. Are you ready? Let's go. It happened once that a mighty storm broke the great dikes, those giant walls which hold back the Zuiderzee. Plunging and rolling, the angry waters rushed in over the flat green meadows of North Holland that lie lower than the sea. The tall windmills waved their arms in vain. They stood knee deep in water. The little toy villages poked their red roofs in huge astonishment above the flood, and the cowbells on the scattered cattle rang out a wild tonka tonka, discordant and alarmed. When the waves began to recede somewhat, and the green meadows showed themselves again, smiling in the sunlight, certain young lassies from the city of Edam set out to carry fresh water to the cows in the distant pastures. For the poor things had had nothing to drink for hours, with only salt water about them. The girls were merrily splashing along through the puddles in their wooden shoes, carrying their pails on wooden yokes slung over their shoulders, when all of a sudden one of them cried, "Look! Look there!" At that, the lassies all stood still. And what should they see in the shallow pool before them but a gleaming silver green tail, floundering helplessly and churning up a shining shower of water. "It's a great fish!" cried one of the maids. "A fish carried in by the flood." "It'll never get back," said another, "for this pool is standing alone with no outlet to the sea." But just as they spoke, a third lass gave a shriek. "Oh, look! Oh, look! It's a mermaid!" There, as sure as butter and cheese, rising from the water, appeared the dripping head and shoulders of a woman, a beautiful woman with sea green hair and a glistening tail of a fish. The girls stood open mouthed. "What a curious thing," whispered one. "Let's take her to the sea." All this time the poor mermaid was struggling sadly with her arms to get out of the mud, hoping to reach a place where she could float and make her way back to the sea. It was beautiful where she lived, far out in the sapphire waters. Her friends and loved ones were there, sporting with the waves. She must return, she must. But the bevy of Edam lassies surrounded her. Though she protested with all her might, they lifted her in their arms and carried her off to town. And let's get up our first photo so you don't have to look at my little smug face all the time here. And I wish I could get these in the correct order for one. I'm missing one. So we'll stick with this one for now. I don't know how I missed one. Sorry about that. But it's a mermaid head sticking out of a shallow pond with the lassie standing around her. Okay, why am I so big? I shouldn't be this big. How about this way? A little better. Yeah. Okay, anyway. Past quiet, sandy canals by the huge, towering Gothic church, as solid as a fortress, they bore her, struggling and straining, to the great town hall. And when the burgomaster heard that a mermaid had been found, you may well believe that he came to the town hall in a hurry, in as much of a hurry, that is, as his dignity would permit him. And the town councillors came likewise, and crowds of people. For Edam was a great city in those days, the Watergate to Amsterdam, with 25,000 burghers, and as many of that 25,000 as could walk and run or hobble, came clumping and clattering to see the marvelous wonder cast up before them by the sea. First they fed the mermaid and treated her very kindly, till they stopped her while struggling and put her at ease. Then they set about in proper manner debating what they should do with her. The burgomaster was of opinion that the mermaid could not be permitted to remain a mermaid in Edam. A mermaid was a wild, fantastical creature, savoring too much of a fairyland. She had no place in a sober, substantial city like Edam. Now you must know that the burghers of Edam had little to do with mermaids and giants and fairies. They lived in a placid and beautiful country and are content with the world as it is. What need have they to go building castles in the air or riding horses of fancy to the moon? Leave it to the poor folk of the barren earth or fen country to the north and the east, in Drayton or thereabouts, to run off to fairyland and have dealings with elves and earthmen and giants. Their own land is poor enough. No wonder at times they must need run away on fluttering wings of fancy. Not so with North Holland. Ah, no, indeed. North Holland is rich and green and satisfying as it is. No need to fly away to North Holland on a wild goose chase into the clouds. So say the people of Edam. North Holland is the land of reality, the land of things as they are, the country of markets and black and white cows. And Edam, ah, Edam is a city of cheese, famed to the uttermost ends of the earth for the glories of its cheese. Have you ever heard of Edam cheese? That's right. In such a place, pray tell, what room was there for a mermaid? The burgomaster stood upon the coat of arms of Edam, hanging on the wall before him, and he was well pleased that it had been adorned with no griffin or dragon or such like fantastical monster. It bore the figure of a fine, sleek, fighting steer, with no nonsense whatever about him. And as the burgomaster looked, he exclaimed with great solemnity, "We cannot let the mermaid remain a mermaid in Edam. There's only one thing to do. We must make her over into a useful Edam housewife." But, cried every young town councilor with a flash of inspiration, why not take her back and put her in the sea? The burgomaster was shocked. Impressively, he replied, nay, that would be shirking our bounden duty. If we put her in the sea, the poor thing will remain always a mermaid and never be anything better. Since she has been brought to us, we must civilize her and make her like ourselves. We must turn her into a good burger vrouw with no absurd nonsense about her. But, objected the young town councilors, maybe she wasn't meant to be a good burger vrouw. Perhaps it isn't in her nature to be a burger vrouw. Perhaps she was meant to be a mermaid and sport in the water. Who are we that we should try to make her like ourselves? Would it not be best to put her back into the sea? But the burgomaster and the older men frowned sternly on the young fellow and thought him a silly booby who was greatly in need of years and gray hair to bring him wisdom. If if he did not know that to be like the burghers of Edam was the height of desirable glories, then he had a great deal to learn. The poor, unfortunate simpleton. Who were they, indeed? So it was agreed by the city council. They would make the mermaid into a proper Edam housewife. Well, they didn't ask permission of the mermaid, but they dressed her up in robes of the finest fashion, then in vogue in the city, and they did their best to cover her long green tail from sight. Every now and then, however, the outlandish thing would show itself below her voluminous petticoats. As to her telltale hair, with sea green sheen like waves flung up by the west wind, why they hid that beneath a white lace cap. All was the very best style and quality, you may be sure of that. And when the mermaid was installed in a good substantial townhouse, the women of the city came by in turns to teach her to sew and to spin and to churn the cheese, which is the pride of Edam. They taught her to work, 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 to save, save, and save, and to take such pride in cleanliness that she could not endure so much as the smallest speck of dirt. They provided her, too, with a stout and buxom servant lass, who scrubbed the floors from morning till night. Pots, pans, windows, hearth, doorstep, sidewalk, house front, yes, even the neat bricks of the street before the door. Scrub, scrub, scrub. And what would you have? With teachings like this, the mermaid was quite made over. She sewed, she spun, she churned. She looked after her servant lass and kept her eternally scrubbing. But sometimes there came memories and the longing upon the mermaid. She longed for the water again. She longed to play with wind and wave, to fly with the flying fish, leap with the dolphins. She longed for her little home of the shells amid the forest of seaweed. She longed to lie lazily and sun herself on the rocks. She longed for her old free life among mermen and mermaidens. That happily, carefree life that had nothing to do with scrubbing, nothing to do with saving, nothing to do with cheese. Then she would tear off her clothes and wriggle away toward the sea. Aye, at such times it took two strong men to keep her from jumping back into the water. It took two strong men to bring her back to the city. They were very patient with her, very courteous, very kindly, the sturdy Burgons of Edam, but they kept unswervingly to their purpose, plodding on and on and on. So by and by, they accomplished their end and crushed all the nonsense out of her. So she no longer tried to run away. She became a proper Burgo Vrouw, who sewn and spun and churned. Then all the good folk of Edam congratulated themselves. We have done fine work, said they, to make a mermaid over into a housewife like ourselves. Only sometimes a child, a very young child, would come and sit before the strange woman with questions in her eyes. She knew something he wanted to know, something the burghers of Edam could not tell him. Let's switch our next one here. There we go. Only sometimes a child, very young child, will come and sit before the strange woman with a question in his eyes. She knew something he wanted to know, something the burghers of Edam could not tell him. Ah, if she would only speak, she could carry him off into a beautiful land, a free, a glorious, a golden land, where dreams were only truth. But alack, the mermaid never spoke. This is one thing the burghers of Edam could not accomplish. They could not make her speak Dutch. No, they could not bring that about. They could not make her speak Dutch, and so she never told her secrets to the children. But one day the burgomaster came in, in condescensory glory to pay an afternoon call and delight his eyes with the sight of good work done by the burghers, for which he took no small amount of credit for himself. Important, pompous, proud, he stood in the mermaid's threshold. Now, he thought, I shall see how greatly we have improved this poor, silly, flirty creature. With that, the servant lass opened the door, and the burgomaster requested her to lead him to the mistress. And now, from an inner room, the mermaid saw the visitor. Her servant had just scrubbed the floor, which was white as driven snow. And had the mermaid not become a proper Edam housewife? Would any Edam housewife permit a burgomaster to soil the fresh, scoured planks by trampling them with his boots? She waved a sign to her servant, who straightway. We got to change this one again. I'm going to stop that one, bring you this next one. A little here. This one's kind of funny. Who straightway pick up the burgomaster up bodily in her arms. Ah, the poor old fellow. He painfully was astounded. How helplessly he kicked his legs. How wounded was his dignity. She bore him to a chair on the opposite side of the hall. Then, without a yes or no, she set him down, kerplunk, as though he had been a baby. She took off his boots and put on a pair of slippers on his feet. And when she had thus prepared him, she led him across to her mistress. Thus, the burgomaster rewarded for civilizing a mermaid. And that's the end. So, I want to thank you very much today for joining us. This was a short story of the mermaid. I will be back tomorrow or later on. We'll see how time goes. With a little bit longer of a story, again set near the same town. And this one's a little bit longer, maybe 6 or 7 pages. And that is The Lady of Stavoren. So I really appreciate you being here today. Please leave a like and subscribe so I can continue to do this. I really appreciate it and hope you really enjoyed this story. I know it was a little bit short. I hope it made a lot of sense. But I'd like to hear some comments from you. If you have any questions, anything that you want to talk about, I really, really want to hear from you. So, with that, we will see you later. Enjoy, good night, and be well.